about tasty recipes for Neos, which you can use every day. The goal is to help you make better websites with Neos. Short about me, I'm a developer for many years. I've done tons of Typo 3, Flow, and Neos projects, and enjoy working on Flow and Neos a lot. I'm also a Neos team member after years of contributing. And now I'm also a product owner at .de in Karlsruhe. Sometimes I live in Cambodia too. And I love hiking and baking, which is a good combination for the belly. And you can contact me on Twitter or everywhere else and with @Sebo. Who is this talk for? If you wonder what it means or what it is about, it's for developers who want to start a new project. It's for developers who want to learn more. Maybe they think there's more possible with the projects they already did. Or they just want to stay up to date, like having this cheat sheet of new things. It's for editors. Maybe, I don't know if there are so many editors here, but sometimes I know they also like to see what is possible, because maybe the developers didn't give them everything they could or something like that. So they might want to know too if things could be easier for them. Or project leaders, be it project manager, PO, or whatever, who want to know what's possible now with the current versions of Neos. So the agenda is first a look into the past, then some improvements to what happened in the past, new recipes too, then some secret thing, and how to become a Neos chef. So first we look into the past. In 2015, Aske Ertmann did this talk already. It's not the same slides, it's just the same topic. And I do the part 2 now this year. And this talk that he held, it was very, it had a lot of text and a lot of examples, which is quite good, because I know a lot of people use his slides still and download them just to check up on all the things that he described at the time. Which is also my goal for this talk, that I have a lot of text on my slides sometimes, and I hope that they will be useful afterwards for you, because I know his slides were very useful to me, so I hope I can continue that. Here are the URLs, if you want them. I will also share the slides, of course, afterwards. Some of his recipes are not valid anymore. Most of them are still working and are still awesome, so I will not talk about the topics that he did in his slides and which were already good. I will talk about the ones that maybe have been improved now with the new versions of Flow and Neos. And yeah. So, in the old slides, there were great recipes already. There were ways to automatically optimize images after uploading them, so the editor doesn't have to care if his pictures are too big or if it is like 5,000 times 5,000 pixels or something. Shouldn't be a problem. That the Neos should solve that, and there are several plugins for that, which he described in his slides. Then automatic deployment with Surf. I will also not go into that, because he already talked about that at the time. Customizable 404 pages, plugin for that. Multi-site techniques, how to make it easier to work with several pages in Neos. Email spam protection, and how to adjust CSS and JavaScript for editors. And much more. The Neos Flow documentation was it got a lot of criticism, that it was not complete, that it was hard to find something. But it has improved a lot. I also use it still, even if I'm working with Neos every day, but I still like to look into the documentation, because it gets better and better, especially since it's on Read the Docs. And you can find a lot of examples there, and things are updated quite regularly. For Neos, one sentence is often used. You can read it on Slack or when people talk to each other. You can do so many things with a few lines of code, which is absolutely true, and what I love about Neos. Because a lot of my problems I can actually solve with a bit of configuration, a bit of YAML, a bit of Typescript, something like that. But finding those few lines is sometimes a challenge. That's why I do a talk like this, to help you find those lines or guide you where to find them. So you can also make things easy. So what has been improved since last year? Aske talked at the time about persistent caches. Why do you want persistent caches? Usually the caches are set up as a standard, like they keep for an hour. So you have something, it stays an hour, but then if you flush the caches or the hour is over, the data is gone. So in Flow 3 now, it's easier to set up persistent caches. You can just tell the cache you are persistent, then the cache is in the file system, and it will not be flushed when you say flow flush all, for example. It will stay there unless you flush it specifically. So you can use that, for example. Here on the lower part, you see the old version that Aske presented, which was, for example, when you deploy your website, the idea is that the editors are not thrown out of their session, that they can still work a minute after deployment and don't have to relog in or get a backend error while they were working, for example. But this was not safe for the cache flushing. And now with Flow 3, this is easier. You just say persistent true, job done, stays there. So, but there's more you can do. In my last Neos and Flow projects, in every project there was the use case that data from third-party APIs or the customer had own APIs in-house. In this case, it was only read-only APIs. And this data had to be retrieved, rendered with Typescript, rendered on the website. There was some basic caching in PHP, which is really awesome to set up with Flow. And then there's the Typescript caching and so on, so it was quite well. But the problem is with APIs, they are not 100% available. Especially if it's in-house APIs, I experienced that there's no SLA for 99.99% availability. So in the one case, the API was gone for 3 weeks. And so I thought about, well, how can I help them? Because I cannot fix their API, but I can solve a problem with flaky API endpoints. You can usually get your API data with a curl request or something, then you get some JSON. And if you get data, first you configure an additional persistent cache. Then you store this data, the valid data. When you verify it, it's good. And then you continue. And if one time this request should fail to your API, you will just use the data from your fallback cache. But inform, this is only logging, but you can also send an email out to some admin or something. If the API is not there, you can still render the page. The website visitor can still work with the results, can do all their things. And meanwhile, you can start, or they can start fixing their APIs. And then it doesn't matter if it's 3 weeks gone. I mean, of course it matters, but the website visitor will not experience any problems. And I think that's quite helpful and super easy to set up with Flow. And it helped the customer a lot because they just they couldn't fix this problem easily. And this way, it was easier. I also here have what I already mentioned. You can keep session data in persistent caches, but you could also use it for dynamic configurations. Maybe you want the customer to have some backend module where they can configure certain settings for the website. Maybe a theme with some settings or something like that, which is not in your YAML files or configurations. So you could make a backend module which saves configurations in those persistent caches. This is not super safe. It could still get lost, and you have to make some backup, of course, but just a use case, a possible one. That's what about the caches. So Aske last year also talked about SEO. how easy it is to add some additional attributes which you can use for meta headers and so on. And since last year, the typo-free Neos SEO package was released, which provides additional configuration for every page. You can set alternative page titles, which customers often use, all kinds of meta tags for Twitter cards, Open Graph, canonical links, XML sitemaps. All these things are just there when you install this package. You can, of course, disable all the parts that you don't want. For example, if the customer doesn't know what to do with Twitter cards, just disable it and job done. So this is quite useful. So that was about the updates to last year. So you see it was not that much, so the things of last year are still good. I have new recipes brought, so you can learn something new, I hope. For the Google Analytics, there's also now a package which provides you statistics in the backend. So every page after you set up the configuration, you can go to every page and see how many page impressions you have there, and also define more things than I show here, but this is quite nice. I don't think there's any adapter yet for Pivik, but that would be also cool if that would be there. I think it's not so difficult to adapt it for that. Also, it provides the tracking script helper that you don't have to do it yourself. You just enter in your settings your tracking ID, and then it works. What I often talk about in my talks is to help editors, because I know that they often have a lot of pain, even with Neos sometimes. And so how can we help them? One thing is, for example, I lost my screen, okay. What you saw this morning, Sebastian showed it, that you can have a condition in your Fluid templates which says, are you in backend or in the front end? But you can also have, in this condition, you could help the editor by, when he adds his new content element, just show him the hint, hey, you have to do your thing in the inspector first before you can really use this element. But of course, you don't want to show this information to the website visitor. So there's not only rendering in backend, but there's also rendering in edit mode. So as long as somebody's editing the site, he would see this information, which he can use to, he doesn't have to wonder, why is my plugin not working or something? It will just tell him, hey, this is the step you have to take. And yeah, this can be quite helpful for the editors, and you can show something else to everybody else. And this also works, what Sebastian showed, that there is the preview mode and the edit mode, and if the editor goes to preview mode, he would also see this message, so he would know what the visitor would see. Editors should understand what they're doing. So one other thing which is takes almost no time for a developer, but which helps the editors a lot, adapt the naming of everything to the vocabulary of the customer. If they want to call stuff differently than you, that's perfectly fine, and you can just change the names. For example, for a headline, if they want to call it lead text, then we call it lead text, no problem. And then it's easy, because then when you have a conference with them, when you have a call with them, and you can talk about the lead text, then there's no confusion. You don't have to tell them in some documentation or something, hey, if you want to add a lead text, select the headline. That's just not necessary. Just change it for them, and it's done. Same for here. If they don't have news, but they have a blog, just change it to blog post. Also makes things easier. Editors shouldn't also not get lost. This is not right. So disable unused features. For example, I said about the SEO plugin, if they don't want to have the Open Graph mix in for Facebook, just disable it, or the Twitter card. You can control all these things. Or, for example, if you have the text with image element, by default, the Neos node types package provides this image alignment mix-in, where you can tell each image is it left, top, right, center, or something. But maybe the design is made like the editor doesn't have to decide. Maybe it's because it's responsive and everything, the position of the image works according to a rule, then you don't need the editor to decide. Just disable the mix-in for the element and no confusion. Then you don't get a ticket like me where some editor asks, hey, what can I do with this alignment? And I told him nothing. And at the same time, I also disabled the feature. Something's wrong with my animation, sorry. Okay. One super important thing which you should use immediately at the start of the project, when you write your first node type definition, use constraints. Use really constraints for everything. I know a lot of Neos backends where you can decide to add a content element, and then you have a selection of 30 different content elements. No editor can understand what to do there. But what you can do in Neos is just say that, for example, in a multi-column, you cannot add another multi-column, which also helps them already not to break the layout, for example. Also, Neos allows you, the YAML allows you to reference certain configurations, so you don't have to repeat yourself here. And here you can, of course, add other stuff, like in a column there cannot be a full width slider or something. Or if you have a definition of a root page, just say that the root page cannot be under any other document. Maybe a landing page can be, but not a root page. It can only be the first level. And that means often that the editor won't even see all those nodes because he doesn't need to see them in his context where he's working. Maybe if he's in his slider, he will only see that he can add a slide. Why should he add something else? Limiting possibilities reduces mistakes quite a lot, and this should be a part of your content architecture. So when you think about what content elements are in the website, what can you do there, just already try to visualize what are the possibilities there. Where can a content element be? Then the CSS is much easier, and everything is much easier this way. Then something which I just found recently, while as Sebastian and Christian this morning said, sometimes just look into the settings file of Flow or Neos and you will discover a lot of interesting things. Because I hated logging in all the time into the backends. It's just so annoying. I have a password manager, I just have to press some combination and then it's done, but it's just too many times. So you can add those 5 lines to your settings in development context, and you don't have to log in so many times anymore. You just tell Flow that the sessions should not time out. And I think not too many people know this from what I heard in my conversations. So maybe that helps someone too. I also experienced that people don't have a password manager, and every time they type in all the passwords and so on, then they use easy passwords because it's so annoying and so on. That's also not a solution. So this one helps a lot. And what is also very nice is the settings file. The settings file doesn't have to be in your configuration folder of your distribution. It could actually be in some helper package or in your site package. As long as it's under the development subfolder, then it will be only loaded when you're in development context. In production context, this wouldn't do anything then. What you can also do now is, I had that in one project, that the generated HTML was so huge. It was just crazy huge. And also gzipping didn't do the whole job, didn't solve everything there. So Custom released, or Overflow Native released, a small package which just includes another package. And this one removes all the unnecessary white space and line endings. This won't break your output. It will just reduce a lot of generated output. So smaller websites. Fluid autocompletion. I know that not a lot of people use this, but I like it a lot. You have to modify your template a bit, because you have to, normally when you just look at the examples and templates that you find online, they don't look like that. They usually have some curly brace, and then they include Neos view helpers, for example, and that's it. And then PHP Storm will tell you that this is absolutely not valid, and you don't get any autocompletion, you don't get any help, you just get colorful lines at the side of your editor. But if you change your template like this and define the view helpers, you can add as many or as you need, the ones that you need, and use those sections. You have absolutely valid HTML, except for this attributes part here, which we have to solve at some point, I think. And when you write those fluid view helpers, you get the autocomplete. PHP Storm will tell you what attributes you can enter. It will highlight if you make a mistake. The only thing you have to do is have this section there, so that Fluid will not render this HTML tag and so on, the stuff that you don't want. I know that it makes the template a bit bigger, but for me, I like it a lot to have just a nice validated output. For that it works, you have to, the only change you have to do in your node type, if in Typescript, is that you have to add the section name. I often just write main. Maybe you have some Typescript object with several sections, if you have some listing or something like that. Then you can just call it like you need to. Yeah. There's also down here, I have the link to the documentation, so you can read more about this topic. What I also like, because I also wrote several of my own view helpers for my templates, and there I also want the autocomplete, I also want the correction and the validation, so, and PHP Storm also allows to have this. So in PHP Storm, when you put your cursor on the URL of the view helpers at the top and press Alt-Enter, at least on the Mac, then it will ask you where to get the schema for the view helpers. You can either have it locally or read it from an actual URL. And Flow allows you to generate your own schemas. So use this command with some settings, and then you can generate your schema file, maybe put it in your package or put it online, which is a bit trickier. And then you also get autocomplete there. Typescript prototypes. They were also already discussed this morning. They are super useful. I understand why Dimitri loves them so much. They allow you to inherit, to have inheritable and extendable modules. You see here, I define my example. It inherits from the text element, but it has the additional CSS class color of love. Then here I say, okay, now it should be different. The color should be the rainbow color. Or if it is my example element is in a column, now it should have the color of peace. This is super easy and super helpful in many cases to just at any point, because Typescript first collects all the configurations, and then that allows you to anywhere in your code override or extend or work on those prototypes. You only have to take care that your inclusion and your dependency is correct, that the side package depends, for example, on your plugin, so you can easily override the configurations. You can, with Typescript, cache almost everything. I think there are not many cases where you really need the uncached mode. I know that some people just use it because they don't know why the cache is not working correctly, but if you invest some hours in the caching configuration and try to understand a bit, read a bit examples, check on GitHub how other people did it, then I think you understand how it works. And what I just learned this morning, actually, if you have a plugin with pagination, then the problem with caching is the page parameter that you maybe have in the URL. So usually that meant a lot of like 3 or 4 lines of configuration that this is still correctly cached, because the cache configuration of the page and the the content area and the element itself have to know that there is an additional parameter influencing the caching, like the page argument in the URL. What is possible now, or maybe since some time already, there's a global cache identifiers object, which is the prototype for all the cache configurations of each and every element in EOS. And you can just add your additional parameter there, and then your caching for your pagination will work perfectly fine. So you can cache your whole page. Now, my super secret bonus recipe. Make screencasts. I experienced that a lot. If you really want to improve what you build for the editors and for your customer, create screencasts of every feature that the customer can use, of every workflow. It proves that your features work at the time, at least at the time when you build it. You can show your PO or anyone else this is really working, or you can show a teammate, maybe they can feedback with it, or send it to the customer already before deploying. Maybe they say, yeah, but that's not what I wanted, then you can work on it, and you didn't lose so much time, you didn't even have to deploy it. You can measure the length of the workflow. I made screencasts of some features. Usually I try to keep them under 2 or 3 minutes, actual video then. And if you see, oh, this takes 6 minutes to create this content element completely, and the customer said he needs about 200 of them, then you can easily calculate how many days he spends creating content elements. That doesn't seem right. So in one case, I thought about my feature again, worked a bit, improved it, and at the end it only took half the time. So after you measure, optimize. You can find bugs, you can find certain things are a bit too difficult, or especially if you make the screencast a bit later after the feature, then maybe you already forgot how it worked, and then you will realize in the screencast, oh, how does it actually work? You can find bugs and inconsistencies. It reduces support, because if you send a video, they can always watch it again. They can show it to a new editor, for example, and then it's you don't have to help every few months or something. It's just solved. And it's more fun than writing documentation and making screenshots and making a circle around the button that they should press or something like that. I hate to do that, so I decided to make videos, and the customer liked it, so I continued doing it. Here's now an example workflow that I use for. I go to a quiet room. I use a headset. Don't use the microphone of your computer, because it will often you will hear the keyboard noise or something like that, or the fan. Don't think too much about it. Doesn't need to be it's not an audiobook. It's not something that thousands of people listen to and want super awesome quality. It's just don't make it suck. Just make it okay. And don't try to make it perfect. In the beginning, it maybe took me like half an hour to get the first one right, and now I just do it, and usually the first try is already fine, and then it takes me 5 minutes, and that's good. Use any simple screencasting tool. You also don't need something super fancy, expensive. I use Voila for Mac, which is quite easy. Make your video, improve your content element, for example. Make a second video, see how it's now better. I export it then to Dropbox. Dropbox automatically loads it at some point. Then I have the Vimeo integration with Dropbox, so at some point I think I get an email that the file is uploaded. Then I can go to Vimeo, just say, okay, put this video into the private space for this customer, and then it's done. I can send them the link, and they can have fun with the video. How to become a EOS chef? Learn from others. Join on Slack.neos.io. A lot of people will answer your questions. I think there are almost 800 people now there. And have a lot of discussions, different channels. You can join any kind of topic and also discuss with the core members. Maybe they have some idea which is not good, and you can tell them, or you have want an explanation or something like that. So that's really nice. You can also join on discuss.neos.io. Robert showed it in the morning. There are many topics there. You can join any topic and give your feedback and so on. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Stay up to date on what's going on, because there are also certain channels where you just see, oh, this stuff is now prepared for the next release. It's not some private information that we have, it's information that everybody can read. So this morning, Aske, or yesterday, showed some list of what will be included in the next release, and you can just look at it. Read the changelogs of every Neos and Flow release. Usually you can, for example, jump to feature, just look maybe what's interesting. Often in the changelog there's also like the link to the documentation or the documentation included. It's open source. That's really good. So you can search for stuff on GitHub or anywhere else. You can fork it. You can learn from what you see there, and you can improve it and give back the improvements that you have. It's just fun to do that. Don't create, if you have some better idea of something that somebody else maybe did, think about maybe you don't need to create your own package for it. Maybe it's just enough to send him a pull request or her and make the small modification, because the maintainer will be happy that he got something, and you will also be part of something bigger maybe. It's really cool. Come up with new recipes. Also share what you find out. It's really cool when people come to Slack or Discuss or somewhere else and they have some idea, and then suddenly 3 or 4 or 5 people discuss the idea, and at the end, maybe after some hours of discussion or something like that, the idea has been much improved and is now usable for everyone. That's really cool. Neos is making things easy. That's at least our goal, what we want to do. TypeScript 2 means configurability and reusability. Always keep that in mind when you build stuff. Prototypes are super powerful, and a lot of stuff can be toggled. So when you create your own packages, when you create your own code, also make it possible to use some setting or configuration to just disable it. Like in the SEO plugin, every feature can be disabled for your nodes. And that also your own packages should deliver that kind of thinking. So then other people who want to use your package but don't like maybe half of it or one feature of it, they can still use it. They don't have to create a different package or a fork or something where the feature is disabled. They can just do it. Don't build too complicated templates. Like Dimitri said, he doesn't use for each loops usually. That's something really nice in TypeScript. You can have those, you can render lists very easily with TypeScript prototypes and smaller templates. You have reusable parts, which you can use in different places and so on, and also make it more configurable if you have a plugin. And that makes it easy for others to use your recipes, which is a big advantage. So, I'm at the end. Are there any questions?
Thanks a lot for the great talk. I really liked the idea about creating screencasts. I just wanted to add one thing, that what I learned in my company, that we switched to all documentation and all source code, everything to be open by default. And I talked to my boss and he allowed me to do that. So when you're like, I think I would be creating such screencasts as well, and if your policy, company policy, allows you to publish it openly, even if it like doesn't really much make sense for everyone, maybe somebody would like it. So what I would like everyone to encourage everyone to do, even if you don't really like have polished package that should be really fun for everyone, but if it's just source code, if anything, the more you publish openly, the more actually you get back yourself. And sometimes I just run over other people's code that and then I see how to do that. So I think the same would apply to screencasts as well. that could be great to have such stuff public as well, if it's possible, of course. Yeah. So.
Yeah, definitely. I like the idea of publishing it. I think sometimes it's difficult because with Neos we create very customized experience, and I know that from the videos I create, most of them wouldn't really help others. Maybe there are some ideas in there which could help other developers, not other editors. That could be the case. For example, I also like that I think Lilith's, they made several videos on YouTube or Vimeo where you can just check out how does the Neos backend work. I think that's super important because people who are interested, the ones that we want to get on board to our whole project, they will watch those videos, and when they like what they see there, maybe it's also good to have of several projects videos there so they see, oh, not only the demo site works like this, but maybe a super complicated web shop, whatever site also works really nicely with Neos. Maybe that makes them decide to use Neos. So yeah, if the customer is fine with that to make it public, then of course, yeah.